The first point on question one was some of the arts people were saying, well, how does this actually impact on me as a working artist? And I think that needs to be made real for artists. And perhaps the way for that to happen is through the local authority plans, but it really does need to be taken seriously. And then on question two, it's related. There was a point made that if art makers, artists, are to interact with schools, etc., they also need support, financial support, to be able to develop their practice so that can feed into their own creativity, and therefore they can be a better resource into the community.
The group looked on this as would be a huge uplift for art and creativity in the community, but it should definitely be community-led, community-focused, not city-bound like it is at the moment through the Arts Council. It provides a great opportunity for groups to get together to network and bring ideas together rather than work as individual groups. It becomes part of the culture within the current communities and the part of everyday life, what's going on in those communities. We discussed the 5-year deadline, and it was felt that it is a positive thing to have a 5-year deadline, but the hope would be that something will carry on after this 5 years. And is there anything in place at the moment that could see that happening?
Can I give you this mic here?
Yes,
Slow it is.
It's a good way of broadening the culture that's in place at the moment and the quantity of the value of it to the community. We also mentioned that culture is more than just arts. It incorporates quite a lot within community, including sport activities, things like that. On the second question, drawing the different strands together, tourism, archaeology. Fingal is full of history of great families, great parks, great coastlines and islands, and this should all be brought into it. But it should also focus on the current population of Fingal, those children that are living in the area at the moment. It should involve the schools and start from the schools and work its way out from there. A survey of green areas within Fingal and archaeological sites should be carried out. And use the school network, we've said that. Yeah, that's basically it from our group. Okay.
Brilliant. That was both questions.
Yes, both questions.
Great, thank you.
On pillar, the strategy, the 5 pillars we discussed, and the question was what particular aspects of the Creative Ireland programme appeal to us. So it was mentioned here, the children part of it, number 1, enable the creative potential of every child, and it was suggested that there should be a child-centred programme encouraging child development and reaching out to every child in the country. Going through to the schools will actually make it work, and there should be a variety of initiatives, and not just stuck on music and things like that. People seem to think that it was just about learning music, and it should include all aspects in sport, for instance, sport and creativity. There was also a feeling with regards to the investing in their creative and cultural infrastructure, and we just had a little bit of debate. We weren't 100% sure on what that was about, but there was a feeling that there were some memorials in certain towns where monuments were located, which was not really ideal, and maybe we should have look at that and see where we could actually place memorials to actually let people know about our culture and visitors, and to encourage, people like artists and sculptures and that to become involved in that. But that's where we were with that one. And then on to pillar 3, I think it was. Again, the community would like to develop new memorials to our history, to remember our history. And then, as I said, the development of the cultural infrastructure there was plenty of ideas to build on that, and we feel that investing in our creative and cultural infrastructure is not as in infrastructure, but it's about linking all the different aspects of the creativity and our culture and arts all together to ensure that it's like a circular movement so that it will develop and grow. And then there was, that's the physical infrastructure. Yeah, sorry, that was about it on that one. Do we want to go on to, this one here is, suggestions were to provide access to open air activities in the centre of towns to create a central focus. Major developments should include provision, specifically conditioning and planning permissions to say commercial development should include opportunities for artistic development and for sculptures, etc. Cultural offices should be located in, we should have cultural offices in towns, linked in and open at weekends when visitors are here to actually let people know about our culture and to encourage people to be involved in that. And then to use other public buildings. Fingal should consult with every household to express our ideas to develop the 5 pillars, and also to have some more investment in our community section within the council that are actually out and about in the communities doing good work at the moment, that we need to build on that and invest heavily in that to encourage that as well, because that's a fantastic medium for getting the message out to, like the memory makers and things like that that we've had that have been so successful. And open up non-traditional spaces to accommodate unseen creativity from this lady here on my left. We were talking about subcultures that are maybe not known about it, I think was the word. Internet opportunities and art that's actually out there, and looking at alternative and probably not mainstream type of arts and culture. Again, make all spaces more accessible to all types of creativity, and recognizing experts in communication to further develop creativity, and to initiate activity for the non-high achievers to try to prevent dropout for low achievers, I think what came from this idea. Basically to provide opportunities for all, and you know, art and culture and everything, it's not just for those that feel they are arty and crafty and into culture, to open up and develop as this is about. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll take that back.
Question one, the headliners that came out of that for us were that they particularly liked, the participants particularly liked the identity of Ireland being worked on in this part of this process. Overwhelmingly, the group wanted to look at focus on children and children's participation. One of the participants suggested that the relationship between schools and the arts were really important, that we should use this, focus on this. Time and again, resources came up as an issue. We put that as a sidebar as part of our feedback, but I think it's important to mention that it was certainly an issue for the community groups. The point was made that we should use this as a mechanism for developing children and the capacity of children and their awareness and their confidence through the arts. That this was in some way the same as we would use sports, you know, to get the children standing tall and to be out there making a difference. The last thing on that question was, it was the starter question too, where one of the contributors said that collaboration is not new. We've been doing it for a long time, and we do it very well, and we do it very well in Fingal. But that it was important for us to build on that, to build on those collaborations. And it was important for the local authority to make things easier for community groups to work in a collaborative way. By far, the biggest thing for us was children and young people. And I think, while I won't go into a lot of what was said in the last question, the one thing that was said was that we should use, because Fingal is so diverse, And we have such an issue now with the different nationalities, the different cultures, that we shouldn't possibly use this as the unique thing for Fingal was that diversity, and that we should use this platform to have children look at diversity, look at difference through all the different music and everything else. And that if we were looking for a hook for Fingal in this instance, it could be the young people and older children and the diversity of Fingal.
Great. Thank you.
With question 1, we really didn't get much further than pillar 1. We felt that that was the most important. It was felt that to foster creativity in every child was the most important, and that if we don't educate children today, we won't have audiences for the future. So that was the most important pillar for us. With regard to question 2 and what could Fingal do, the group felt that we needed to promote arts and creativity more within the Fingal area, as there's not enough awareness of the work, the good work that's done in the relevant departments, for example, through the Arts Office, the Heritage Office, and even within the libraries, etc. It was also felt that there are not enough opportunities for local communities to engage and participate in the arts in a meaningful way. And we ended up really kind of talking these main points out quite a lot. And yeah, that was it really for us. Does anybody else in the group have anything they'd like to add? Initially, to begin with, probably why we got delayed, was that there was confusion over the role of Culture Ireland as well, and what that would mean for artists around the table in terms of funding. If they were funded by one organisation, for example, the Film Board, are they eligible to then apply, say, to the Arts Council? And at the moment they currently can't, but with Creative Ireland, what is the expectation there as to additional funding and how that will directly affect artists?
Thanks, Sarah. I suppose just before we move on, there isn't any right or wrong feedback here, by the way. If you spent the time discussing that, that's really valuable. So it's not important if you don't get through the whole thing, and actually we'll also take the feedback from the table. I mean, I would probably just take the opportunity and, to reiterate what Michael said, is that Creative Ireland isn't a funding agency, we're not a funding body, but I think the ambition is that through the work of Creative Ireland, with working at the level that it can work, that will unlock the resources for other agencies who are already doing work really well but need additional resources to achieve their ambition, and that will then flow through to artists, to arts organisations. So the ambition is that, and Michael might correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what our ambition is that. And I think that's what we mean when we say that it'll be self-extinguishing in 5 years, because ideally that investment will come through. And organisations like Arts Council, Film Board, Culture Ireland, local authorities, that the resources will be there to give that lift. That's the ambition of it, I think. And that would be felt throughout the sector with artists as well as with participants and communities. So that's and I think we talk about this, what success looks like for Creative Ireland is if this is made a reality, and if those resources and that ambition, that collaboration comes through, then Creative Ireland should be redundant, because it'll become embedded within our public policy and within our government departments. That's the ambition.
Our table was very positive generally about the whole programme. They liked the idea of the language and that the use of the word creative better than just straight arts, that it seemed very democratic. Felt that it shouldn't be limiting across any of its ideas. Everybody loved the idea of children, and especially thought that the idea of play and how that is a creative thing can be brought to children and through their programmes. The programme shouldn't be afraid to take risks and should avoid barriers. And the idea of it being cross-departmental was really praised by quite a few members in the group, but really health should be included, because that's part of everything. With regard to question 2, how it would develop for Fingal specifically and how it might happen for us, generally the group felt that it should revolve around what a distinctive place Fingal is. Fingal has an old people, old language. It has an amazing geography of the coastal villages with special natural places in between. That whole idea of geography feeding into the creativity was mentioned by quite a few people. The North County as a concept should be really, really used in the programming of the work, and to use the development and history of the place as a springboard as to how we develop over the 5 years. And lots of people also said that we should have more links across the county. We should use this program to do this between this east and west in our county. There's a little bit of a divide there. And also within the bigger towns, that we should use it to mix the older and new inhabitants. Another person had an idea that we should use it to see Fingal through a stranger's eyes, and that in itself will make us look at the whole idea of how these creative projects can be stitched into everybody's world, and to open up the idea of the Fingal being kind of a secret place, and that we might be an idea to work with, and that this special character, we really need to introduce it to more people throughout the 5-year program.
Lovely. Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you very much.
This was a very strong and positive discussion we had. There was a number of things we welcomed. We certainly welcomed the issue of the focus on the well-being of the individual, but equally as well, we looked at the issue around that collective and partnership idea, and we felt that was a very positive aspect, obviously. Focus on children, and I suppose children of all ages from 79 to 9 months. And basically it was very, very important that issue around, as I say, all ages should be looked at. And although there's a lot of discussion around and focus on schools, etc., as I say, the more senior members of our society should also be looked at. We welcome the issue around performance and showcasing ideas as well, supporting emerging artists as well as somewhere we think can really embed itself within the strategy. Also the issue, I suppose, in terms of, it's a welcome initiative that we see a collaborative across all the departments, all the governmental departments, the council, and then, as I say, right down into the community and the other arts organisations as well, and we certainly welcome that, because it certainly celebrates the diversity of who and what we are. I suppose one of the other issues from a Fingal perspective, and I'll jump between 1 and 2 just to confuse matters, but one of the areas here in terms of the public consultation, we talked a lot about communication. There's a lot around the kind of digitalisation, etc., media and whatever, but also there's a lot of people who are excluded from that and don't feel part of that as well. And how do we bring those people on board within this strategy? And we felt that it was an important issue. In terms of then where we are with space was another issue, and we looked at it from people from Balbriggan here, from Malahide, etc., and how do we utilise that space, and how do we utilise what we have in terms of community resources, but equally as well, how do we be creative about the space as well? I think it was mentioned earlier as well. We felt that was important. Issues around things like, where does transport come into this? How do we make the arts accessible? And also, how do we quality approve this strategy as well, in terms of that it is accessible, that everyone feels part of this strategy, and that was something come out of it as well. It has to be said as well that there's a lot of good work on the ground within Fingal. Fingal's also an extremely important, not just saying this because there's council officials here, but they are a very welcoming supporter of the arts within the county council area, and that has to be recognised and utilised as well, and how we then move into this strategy with that generous support that's there already. I'm just trying to see, in terms of, community education, professional development, all the other tables have mentioned all of this as well, and we certainly felt that as well. So I think that was more or less it. Yep.
Brilliant. Thank you. Perfect.
Again, there was a very positive response of the table to the programme. On the first question, everyone thought Pillar 1, the children, were very important. Language was also an issue that was raised. Every child has a right to learn Irish, to speak Irish, and it can be taught with fun through music and dance and reenactment, and it can have a positive effect on parents also. The other issue was diversity, and it was considered that the Fingal is unique in its diversity in its communities, and that it was important to bring those diverse communities into the program as well, and other cultures. On the second question, creative spaces was important in making them available for people to display their offering, whole talks, sales and exhibitions for artists. Moving key festivals around the county on a rotation basis rather than concentrate on one area in particular. Having a database of creative people who are willing to share or volunteer workshops that the community could access, and a digitization of artifacts. Another program that might assist in where artifacts are held in the home, that these could be digitized to keep a record for future generations.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Just looking at the question 1 about the aspects of the programme, just a few comments. Positive things were around the group, like the inclusiveness and the diversity of the programme. A more negative comment, maybe that there wasn't any mention when talking about different ways of arts and culture. There was no mention of radio, and some people in the group were quite interested in the whole aspect of radio and how can be used for telling stories. A comment about coding, that it was very important that modern media is used. And I suppose maybe one of the comments about the coding was that in the programme, it's as presented, it seemed to be aimed at more younger people, where it was felt that maybe coding could be something that could be directed at older generations as well. We also spoke about the built environment and the importance of using architects at all stages of development. Okay. And then there was just the whole area of maybe looking at the bigger picture, while in order to access culture and arts programs, maybe you need to have better infrastructure. For people to engage properly, they need to have time, they need to have disposable income most of the time. And so it's a bigger picture than just a program for arts and culture. It's an infrastructural issue as well. There was also a feeling that the program itself, it was positive in that it wasn't all high level stuff. So there was, ground level stuff as well. Just on the second question, some suggestions for Fingal's involvement. There was talk of a multinational kind of multi-discipline fair, where people would be able to have stalls and present their own culture and traditions. And while this acknowledged that this happens kind of in individual areas on a Fingal-wide basis. Suggestion about maybe having suggestion boxes in public places, libraries, etc., and maybe a possible phone number where people could give their suggestions around development of arts and culture. Another suggestion about maybe tourist offices and changing the name maybe from Tourist Office Information to Tourist Culture and Community Information. Discussion around provision of rehearsal space for bands. There doesn't seem to be a lot of rehearsal spaces, according to people who know about it around the table. And looking at maybe diverse musical festivals rather than just one genre, maybe that there would be musical festivals with diverse types of music. Anybody else that I missed? No.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you.
One of the things that we felt was that without looking at this process becoming financially sustainable, not funded, but actually sustainable, it's not going to work. The bottom line is, if you look at, and John mentioned that part of what's been looked at is the longitudinal study on the evidence of the impact of arts on children. I was involved in a longitudinal study with Young Ballymun in Ballymun, where thousands upon thousands of millions of pounds were invested, giving us the evidence, showing what worked, showing the impact on the children, and then the funding was pulled and it's all gone and everything's back to normal again. We don't want that to happen. If this initiative is to work, it has to have sustainability behind it, not investment certainly in the short term, but each community must be able to make it viable for themselves. I also think, well, we also think rather, we shouldn't forget that we actually have a huge artistic intellectual property within Fingal, and therefore we need to make sure we tap into that. So we don't need huge amounts of money because we have the intellectual resources there at our fingertips. It's just oftentimes those people are working in a silo and they're not connected. So from our perspective, the fact that there would be a focus on inclusion, a focus on working together and integrating of all, whether it's integrational, intergenerational, or internationally raising our profile, that's really key. It is about that coming together, because independently we're not going to get anywhere. We talked about, as other people have, not losing the old crafts, making sure that we have those old crafts, that they're brought back, lace making, knitting, things that actually help to calm down children. We also talked about coding, and we also talked about the fact that children are already making small films with Instagram and things like that, and a lot of us, me included, don't know what they're at or how to do it. But the reality is it's an art form in itself. So we also felt that given that, what we need to do is an actual study, a database of what is available, who is doing what in the area, in Fingal. Because there's a whole host of different ways that art can be expressed. It's not all just about acting or painting or singing. It has a huge breadth of things that it does. So we felt very strongly around the table that we needed to make sure we looked at that. Writing and creative writing, hugely important. We also felt that it was very important that a reliance is not put on the schools to develop programs that will actually support children getting arts, because the teachers are already stretched beyond capacity as it is. If it's school based, then it really will be the policy of the school as to what actually happens or doesn't happen. If we want it to be a Fingal and a county based thing, then we have to take it by the scruff of the neck. And I do think that we can't be expectant that, you know, new things can be put in place, because we have hundreds of buildings in Fingal that are not used in the evening times. We've schools that close at 4 o'clock. They don't open again till 9 o'clock the next day in a lot of cases. We have heritage properties where the same thing happens. We have a plethora of actual buildings that and it's about looking at what we should do with those rather than building something that's specific for our needs. But I think fundamentally what we all talk about was our story, speaking our story in a positive way. Everybody in every community and all of us here know that as a nation, Ireland is great at showing the problems we have, and we rarely say how great we are. And it is about finding a forum or a medium whereby people can tell that narrative in whatever way they want to. And, you know, somebody over here talked about the age of like 9 to 79. And I think that's really important, because the theme throughout all our discussions here was that whole process of integrating communities and welcoming other communities, but also integration of our older population with our younger population, and using those resources to possibly create a story and a positive story. So you're not having to fund something major, you're actually just putting an investment into what already exists. So I think, is there anything else? Oh yeah, and we need insurance that is community-based, that doesn't put artists off having to, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you.
Well, I think virtually everything that we discussed has already been covered, but I'll just pick up on a couple of things. On the first question, we spent most of the time discussing the initiative with children and making something available for every child in the country, which we thought was a great idea. I suppose there we felt that, you know, already say there is a lot of involvement with, say, what Michael was describing earlier as the informal sector, and we wouldn't want that to be lost by formalizing it, in the sense that we felt that there was a lot maybe that children got out of doing music or dancing or singing or art that wasn't in school, and that often that involved artists and other practitioners delivering that, and we wouldn't want to lose all of that by formalizing it and putting it into the kind of strictures of the school system. So, you know, points around that came up where, you know, I think everybody felt that, you know, could there be a model where we brought in people into schools, because recognizing that teachers may not be in a position perhaps to deliver programs like this, that there was a lot of richness by bringing practitioners of all sorts, including artists and others, into schools to share their own experience, their own kind of lived experience of being a practitioner with children and inspiring them in that way. And that, you know, other things that might be considered would be training the trainer kind of idea, that, but exposing teachers, exposing students to real artists, to real practitioners, and not just expecting a kind of a package to be delivered by teachers, because we all felt, well, there's not enough time in the school day, teachers are overstretched, they're expected to kind of fill every void in society, and perhaps there's a lot of richness there going on that, you know, needs to be kind of captured in doing this, but great support for doing all of that at the same time. So then moving on to question 2, I think there we felt that, you know, how can we link artists and creative practitioners generally with local communities, and how can we link perhaps people into local groups? Every community has lots of local groups, really active, really, you know, everything from men's sheds to tidy towns groups to Girl Guides and Sea Scouts, and, you know, how can we link different generations, but how could we see artists or other practitioners as being kind of central to doing this kind of new collaborating, and then leading perhaps to locally kind of based projects that are kind of leveraging also maybe our rich kind of cultural and natural heritage. So building on the resources we have, using the sites, the locations, the theatres, the Seamus Ennis centres, the heritage buildings, whatever it is, but kind of really doing that joining up work. And I suppose underpinning all of that, I mean, we did also mention kind of income and support for practitioners, that in all of this, we have to remember there are people there, artists or architects or archaeologists or whoever it is, or local historians. Some of them need to be paid, and some of them, that's their life's work. For other people, it's getting from A to B and covering kind of small expenses, but still they're there. And if we're going to want to do this, we need to figure out how to set up, I think somebody mentioned the word infrastructure earlier, but how do we set up that kind of infrastructure to enable that to happen? And I think that's it.